I'll tell you about electrochemical metamaterials, which is actually an absolutely new term, not yet accustomed, not yet established. The idea, first of all, of electrochemical metamaterial, before understanding it, you must understand what metamaterial is. Metamaterial is a material with some odd, funky, disruptive properties. Properties that people didn't have before, that don't come naturally as it is. The whole kind of term of metamaterials first came out with photonic metamaterials. It means there are some materials which will have very, very strange optical properties. For instance, like, because we're sitting in this university, this is one of the leading groups in the world in terms of the most old metamaterials, like invisible cloaking. That's a group of John Pendry and some people who are working with him, like that, how to make the material a perfect lens, so the light will be passing by it and will screen, you will not see you, for instance, you will disappear from that vision. It's still a long way in realization of this kind of mathematical dream, which was predicted first theoretically. And that is just one example. In principle, if we are talking about metamaterials, it may be not only optical metamaterials, maybe electromechanical metamaterials, related with, for instance, robotics, or they usually not called metamaterials, they're called smart materials. The materials that can do some funny functions at your own will. Why electrochemical? Electrochemistry is essentially a science which can be, in two sentences, a very old science of course, can be reduced to the following thing. You have an electrode and have an electrolyte. And when you polarize that electrode, you charge it, then there will be counter ions of the opposite side of the charged electrode will come there and build what's called electrical double layer or space charge in front of it. And then your electric field, which is due to polarization of that electrode, will be localized in very narrow space of the thickness of that double layer. Usually this depends on concentration of electrolytes, and it can be 1 nanometer or more like that, but then what is happening within one volt, you can have a field which will be like potential drop of 1 volt per 1 nanometer. This is very difficult to create in physical systems. Only recently, when people started to work with nanogaps, they were able to achieve such fields. So what's exciting about having such fields? In electrochemistry, it was nothing exciting. It was everyday reality for them, because they were using that potential, first of all, to drive electrochemical reactions. You polarize your electrode, for instance, positively, and negative ions are coming to the surface, and then they will take part in an electron exchange. It will be what's called Faraday process or electrochemical reaction. That was one kind of application. Other kind of applications are batteries or supercapacitors and many other things. So that was standard there. But to use those kind of abilities to dramatically change the properties of a material, whatever it is, and we will come to that point, I'll tell you which kind of material that could be. That's a new direction, new turn, how electrochemistry can be used. Because we are accustomed, it's batteries, it's fuel cells, it's all these standard things, or reactions, or polishing of metals, and all those applications. But it may have actually other applications as well. Okay, now let me speak about photonic metamaterials, even more narrow, the so-called plasmonic metamaterials, because that's how actually photonic metamaterials started. And what is the science of plasmonics, and when it all started? Long time ago, it was approximately in 1970s when the people like Andreas Soter in Düsseldorf and Kretschmer suggested certain geometries of prisms that they can focus light in such a way that by shining light on the metal surface, then they can excite the so-called surface plasmon. So first of all, what is it, plasmon? Plasmon is a collective excitation of electrons. It's nothing very complicated for an expert to understand. What is metal? in the first place. You have a skeleton of positive ions and you have more or less free electrons, a sea of free electrons floating there. And this is why they conduct, because when you apply voltage at the two sides of your piece of that metal, so you will push those electrons going in that direction of the field. Opposite to that, of course, because field is positive, electrons are negative. But plasmons are excitations when, let us say, when locally electrons will get kind of concentrated and then in another place they're depleted, and so that wave, like an acoustic wave, will propagate in that system. And of course, as every wave, it has its own law of propagation. Its frequency is related to its wave vector or momentum, and that is called dispersion relation. And that dispersion relation for plasmon is such that you cannot directly excite it by shining light on it, because you cannot satisfy both conservation of energy and momentum. And those two people, maybe there were more, but these are the most brilliant kind of examples where they created these setups where they can break that kind of relationship that you cannot excite them, and they were able to excite plasmons, they were able to study those plasmons, so the so-called phenomenon of attenuated total reflection. The light is shined and it is not reflected in full because it excites a plasmon, and so you can see then that plasmon. And that was more or less academic investigation. I may be wrong because I'm not very much bothered about what was at that time, but soon something happened. And if I said those papers were in 70s, then in approximately, if I'm not mistaken, 77 or some, there was a discovery of a giant Raman effect, which was called surface enhanced Raman effect. What is it, that Raman effect? First of all, what is Raman effect itself? Raman scattering is a nonlinear process. When you shine light with certain frequency, and you then will scatter light with a different frequency. And the difference between those frequencies will be due to interaction of that light with some vibrational modes. And exactly the difference in the frequencies associated with the quanta of those modes, how you can get excited. That is a weak process. It's a non-linear process, so probability of this process is very low. And when Raman scattering was discovered, it was in parallel, was discovered a long time ago by Raman and Krishnan in India, and by Mandelstam and Landsberg in the Soviet Union. But Raman and Krishnan did it in solutions. Their probes on which this light is kind of scattered, they were in solutions, and the Mandelstam and Landsberg did it on crystals. And crystal, it was just phonon or vibration of the lattice, and you can see it there. There is a big difference in terms of applications. Who really cares about those crystals? But in the case of Raman, it's a whole world of chemistry. Why? Because water is not transparent in infrared region. And infrared region are vibrations in molecules. They correspond to vibrations in molecules. And all chemistry is about those vibrations of molecules. So if you cannot go and directly probe those vibrations, you lose quite a lot. But using Raman scattering, you can do it. You can go through transparent window, then reflect through transparent window, and the difference in frequency will probe this kind of difficult range of frequencies which are associated with chemistry. The story was very sad for the Soviet side at that time, because Raman got the Nobel Prize, actually got it alone without Krishnan. And it was interesting, I don't know whether it's true, but it's written like that. It's a legend that he bought his ticket to Stockholm at that time, a year before the Nobel Prize was announced, because it was cheaper, to half if you buy it earlier. It was, you have to take a ship at that time. And anyway, he really wanted it very much, and for that reason, in the Soviet Union, people didn't use at least the term Raman scattering. They used combination light scattering, which was introduced by Landsberg and Mandelstam, but it didn't go anywhere further like that one. Anyway, but in order to show this effect, Raman had to use very concentrated solution of those analytes he wanted to study like that, because the signal, what people call the cross-section of the scattering, is very small. So they had to have a lot of that stuff there. Is that very interesting? It's almost closer to a crystal. Not for some applications may be interesting enough. But what is very interesting, to detect the fingerprints, I'll explain what the spectral lines of those molecules are always unique. They're fingerprints, and people call it Raman fingerprints of a molecule. So if you can detect a very small number of such molecules, in that case you will be able to detect the presence of the molecules, for instance, those molecules you don't want to be here, including Tara gases or poisons, any illegal substances, things like that. And direct Raman effect, as it was, didn't give that option. So what was discovered is called the so-called surface enhanced Raman effect. It means where people saw rough surfaces of metals, and there they've seen very large enhancement of that signal. And it was first observed by, in Southampton, by Martin Fleischmann and two of his colleagues, Hendra and McQuillan. And they thought, they misinterpreted that result. They thought it is because there are a lot of stuff on this rough surface. But later on, Van Dyne in the United States has proved that if you measure that surface and calculate how much stuff you can absorb there, it will not work, because enhancement was sometimes between 10 to 8 to 10 to 12 orders of magnitude. And then he came up, and many other scientists also came up with an idea. This is an excitation of surface plasmons, and then there will be, in these gaps and cracks, there will be hotspots for electromagnetic radiation. Because Raman scattering goes as a force power of electric field and electromagnetic radiation. And so if you enhance it, for instance, 3 orders of magnitude, you will get 10 to 9 orders of magnitude of Raman signal. And that was in the 70s, 80s. I was at one conference where people were discussing it till late midnight, what the nature of that and so on. Then came a new era of nanotechnology. And nanotechnology of 90s started with that you can build a lot of kind of structures with nano-resolution, different architectures, and if you can build them, you must have an idea what for you're building them, and which kind of effect they will be giving you. And one of them was to work, for instance, with nanoparticles. So if you have these nanoparticles in some proximity to each other, you shine light on it, then because there is a localized plasmon resonance, so electrons are going here, and here you have a bare skeleton, then goes back, and so on. There is a resonance phenomenon, so you'll have a very high electric field in between. That's called hotspots. And then in those hotspots, how you can use them? First of all, you can use them for surface enhanced Raman effect. If an allied molecule will get in that hotspot, so you can then detect enhanced Raman signal of that.